Welcome to this month's edition of Field Notes. I'm your host, Jeff Weisenberger. This month's guest is Hunter Ruthrauff, a senior design associate with TY Lin International's Architecture and Visualization Group in San Diego, and he's also this year's AISC Forge Prize winner. Welcome, Hunter. Thanks for being with us here today.
Awesome to be with you.
Yeah, thank you. It looks sunny there. It's sunny here, but I feel like it's always sunny where you are. Can you tell me, are you from San Diego, or if not, where did you grow up?
I'm not. Yeah, I'm a transplant, like a lot of us in San Diego. I originally grew up in Southern California, specifically LA County, right on the border of LA County, Orange County, in the town of La Mirada.
Okay, is that where you spent most of your youth?
I did entirely. Yeah, and all the way through my undergraduate until I moved to Seattle, and then eventually came down to San Diego, and then had a year in Denmark studying abroad in college too.
Oh, great. So yeah, you kind of made your way and then all the way back down. So speaking of undergrad, or just college and then graduate school in general, where did you go to school?
Yeah, so I stayed local. I went to Cal Poly Pomona, which was like a half hour from my house. Lived at home. For graduate school, I went up to the University of Washington. Was there for a year and a half, and so I should back up. I got my Bachelor of Architecture from Cal Poly Pomona, and I got my Master of Science in Architecture, emphasizing digital fabrication and parametric design.
Excellent. I definitely want to talk about that in a little bit. So Denmark, I didn't know about that. Tell me briefly, how was that? Did you know Danish? Did you learn Danish?
No one knows Danish. That's
but everybody there speaks English?
Yeah, they speak perfect English. I lived with a Danish person who's a good friend now, and he would always tell me it's so much easier to describe things in English because there were so many more words. That was an experience that really changed like everything. That it was my first experience in Europe. The architecture was tremendous. So I was there for a full year, and my then girlfriend, now wife, was with me.
Well, so what made you choose Denmark, or is it one of those, Denmark wants you, so you've got to come to Denmark, or did you specifically seek it out?
No, there was a few options on the table: Greece, China, Florence, and Denmark. And Florence definitely sounded appealing, but I was really looking to get out of my comfort zone. And that definitely was outside of my comfort zone. And also, I knew that there was great modern architecture there. And so my daily commute, I used to live in Vestergaard. And all that means is I would travel to the city every day, and I would go by Biggs Mountain House, the Blue Cube by the French architect, the name escapes me. But there was just all these tremendous pieces of architecture just on my way to school.
That's a great commute. I like that. I have to ask, did you ride a bike?
I did, of course. That's basically mandatory, but it was heavy transit, and just the regional trains. Transportation in Denmark really is top notch.
So when did you first become interested in buildings then? I mean, it sounds like you saw some really neat stuff when you were over there, but obviously you got started down that path before you went to Denmark. So I was just curious, was there some building that you saw when you were younger that kind of made you go, aha, like a light bulb went off in your head and made you think that you wanted to go into the world of, design and construction?
Yeah, the light bulb moment happened later for me in undergraduate, but in general, growing up, I was always interested in buildings, thinking about, what's under this layer. There's got to be something in between here, kind of a thing. I had that interest, but I was definitely that kid in elementary school, middle school, and high school that was just sketching feverishly. Typically it was abstract forms, symbols, and a lot of animals, actually. So that was kind of part of my portfolio to give to undergrad. I got into Cal Poly. And I think, unlike a lot of my colleagues, I didn't have anyone that was in the building profession, engineers or contractors. So when I arrived, I had no idea what an elevation, section, or plan was. So that was new to me. So I was kind of on the fence my first year, but there was this professor that showed me Caltrava's Seville Bridge, and then also the Eye in Valencia. And that was that moment of like, oh my God, that buildings can be so much more than what I see around me. And lo and behold, Caltrava specializes in bridges. And so that was also the moment I was like, God, I got to get into bridges somehow.
Well, that's excellent. Yeah, I was going to say, I was at the Athens Olympics in 2004. And so got to see his, he designed that campus, and even, some of the venues and the buildings themselves have a bridge-like feel to them in a way.
Absolutely. I mean, that whole stadium structure is those giant arches, there's cables everywhere. It's got very a bridge-like quality to it.
You're at TY Lin now. Can you maybe go back a little bit and kind of talk about, from that early stage and the early stages of your career to where you are now?
Sure. So when I my first office job was an undergraduate. Went to work for an industrial architecture firm that like specialized in manufacturing buildings. So maybe that was the reason I was on the fence a little bit. But most of my work from undergraduate through graduate school was residential and commercial. So working for small 2 to 3 person firms, that sort of a deal. Eventually, when I graduated from University of Washington in Seattle, I followed my then girlfriend, now wife, to San Diego, and I had a really good friend that was working for Soft Urabinas, and they're a unique firm in that they do all kinds of civic work and residential, but they also specialize in bridges, which is kind of unique for a company. Right. So they hired me on to work for the 6th Street Bridge in Los Angeles.
Okay.
Through that, TY Lin was the engineers, and so I got to a working relationship with them and eventually jump ship.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Can you point to one of like a specific one project that's maybe the most memorable or rewarding, or even one that's like, oh wow, that one was a bear. I liked it, but I don't want to ever do one of those again.
I would say it was probably the first structure that got built for me at TY Lin was the Idaho Avenue pedestrian bridge in Santa Monica. It's got it's a spiral alignment that kind of transforms from a ramp into a staircase. It's small. It's a very small bridge, but it has a really smooth set of V-piers adjacent to the staircase. So it's definitely a complex looking structure, and it taught me a few things. The first is the importance of fabrication, right? And understanding how you're going to make that form, and how we've got a ways to go to increasing or advancing fabrication for these structures.
Speaking of bridges and like kind of complex and interesting bridges, can you talk a little bit about your design for your Forge Prize winning bridge? So, and you did maybe just tell me a little bit how you decided on the concept, because I know it's in Balboa Park, and I was just curious if you had a personal connection or if you just saw kind of a good opportunity there.
Yeah, kind of a mix of both. So I live in South Park, it's a perimeter neighborhood to the east of the park. And so I also frequently mountain bike in Florida Canyon with my neighbor. And so I'm always over there and cognizant that really the east and west sides of the park are cut off from circulation. Canyon's a fantastic resource in the park, but it does represent a geographic hurdle, right, in connecting it. So in addition to that, there have been kind of whispers and ideas of a bridge at that location over time. The precise plan for Balboa Park shows a dashed line there for the bridge. And so I figured, win or lose, I really wanted to take that bridge forward and make it into something real eventually. So that's kind of where the idea for it started. And it's also really important for the continued development of Balboa Park for a bridge to be there, because the Prado comes in, from the west there, stops at the canyon, and the master plan shows development in the east rim. So yeah, that was kind of the idea.
Sure, that's interesting. Yeah, I've been to San Diego several times, and I've got family there, but I have to say, Balboa Park, I think the only time I've ever been there was to go to the zoo. So I know it's a big park, and I know there's a lot more. So you're reminding me that next time I'm there, I need to actually go see more of Balboa Park.
There's a lot to see there. It's twice the size of Central Park almost. And so I think most tourism is definitely focused around the Prado, but there's a lot of great resources within it.
Talk to me a little bit about the 3D printing aspect. How does this work exactly with a bridge of this size?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the questions early on from the jury was about whether you print this in place or how do you do that. And so the idea is that you set up a temporary facility over the Arizona landfill, right, which is on the east rim of the park and is underutilized. You set up these robots, which they use a wire arc additive manufacturing technology. Essentially, all that's doing is it's a robotic head that's moving a wire arc welder in the shape of a section, and then it kind of grows by growing each section vertically. So the idea is you gang a few of these together to print a larger structure so that you're not, taking forever to build a part. You build it on the side and then crane that part into place. So that's component fabrication. Of course, an important part of the construction of the bridge is the concept of balanced cantilever segmental construction. So you build over the column, you build outward until you get it cantilevered, and then you can put in that keystone part that gives the arch stability. And so the benefit of printing it just off to the side is that you don't have to rely on the choke point of trucks and roads to get it from a facility to the site. And so you could theoretically print a much larger part and put it together in pieces, which means shorter construction time.
Right. No, that's excellent. That's really good. I mean, obviously any construction project, you have to kind of like factor in the space you have to do such things. But yeah, no, this sounds like it sounds like you've obviously thought through like where this could all take place within the park. So, and obviously part of the awards program is you get to work directly with the steel fabricator. I'm just curious. I mean, especially there's always the perception that architects don't really. I don't know if the average architect has ever been to a steel fabrication shop. So was this your first time working directly with a steel fabricator?
It was the first time working directly with a structural steel fabricator. So, and that's true. Most of the time, the structural engineers are interfacing. But of course, if you design curvy shapes like I do, I'm very much in the process of tracking down the right fabricators to understand how it's made. I think that's the key to not escalating costs later on.
Right.
And so this was my first time working with the structural steel fabricator, which was Glenn Tabelt out of STS. And we very much focused on really the end diaphragms of these 3D printed parts, as the end diaphragms were actually plate steel that the printers built on top of. And so we really focused on that, and then also kind of the bolted connections for each end diaphragm and even the hatch to give you access into the part. But I also worked with Gijs van der Velden, who's the CEO of MX3D, the steel 3D printers, and we really focused on really the capabilities of his machine and what could we really realistically get done if this were a real job. Focusing on print access, maximum slopes, print times, cost, and also size. So he was instrumental in driving the overall shape of the proposal.
It's a beautiful project, and congratulations.
Just to add on to that a little bit, in my day job, while I'm not, most of my interaction with fabricators is definitely, or steel fabricators is definitely focused on rail systems and canopies. So very complex parts. But the reason I haven't worked with many structural steel fabricators is because most of the structures I built are in concrete.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your experience with 3D printing.
I'm definitely obsessed with it. I printed the first object back in undergraduate school using a Z-Corp powder printer, and it was really kind of a light bulb moment. And it made me think about instantly scaling it up for construction applications, which 10 years later, that's what we're doing. So it's an exciting time. I personally have owned a few of my own machines. A few years back, my wife and I ran a 3D printing business, printing models for local university students. TYLN's got a number of 3D printers that I kind of oversee, and we use that for a variety of reasons, from printing details at 1:1, or study models or even full-scale architectural models that we bring in for presentations or just for client review. So it has become an instrumental part of our process. We even have CNC machines in our San Diego office for milling larger parts.
Well, yes. And so speaking of your day job, can you tell me a little bit about your role with TYLN? So you're I think I got this right, the Architecture and Visualization Group.
Yeah, exactly. AVG for short. Yeah, I'm a lead bridge designer based out of San Diego. The AVG is a corporate resource, so we work with offices around the globe, a lot of work in Southeast Asia, South America, the Middle East, and across the States. So where there's a bridge, we come a calling. And so I focus strictly on bridges, pedestrian, vehicular, large rail, small to large. That's really the focus. My tasks really revolve around architectural concept and the development of that, and then heavy 3D modeling, both conceptual and detailed, and then working with the engineers on those details. I get into visualization as well, and then I also head our 3D printing program. So we've got printers scattered about the West Coast, and we use those quite frequently.
I also came across something called M-Form you're involved with. Can you tell me what M-Form is?
Yeah, sure. So when you're obsessed with curvy shapes like I am, you start to think about how can we build these more economic. And so I founded a startup that you called M-Form that is based on technology I developed or invented in graduate school. Okay. So what it is it's a robotic mold that specializes in the mass customization of curved surfaces. So facades, interior panels, but also concrete formwork. It works a lot like a pin art toy, right? Okay. Where you have a bed of pins, but you see them kind of, you put your hand through, you see that as a height field. Same concept, except for those pins are digitized and pushed into position by actuators, and then the mold surface is smoothed out with an elastic membrane. So the whole idea is that we're trimming out CAM to CAD, G-code production, machining, stock materials, all of it, and we're going in seconds from a digital surface to a physical one that mimics it.
Okay. So when it comes to M-Form, how does the funding work for that?
Yeah, so we've gotten through a significant amount of prototyping, we've gotten through design. So we're at the point now that we're looking to build the very first machine, which is a 4 foot by 4 foot machine. Okay. And so we're in our seed round of funding right at the moment.
Excellent. Where's it going to be located? Do you have a place for it?
It'll be in San Diego. It'll be built in Central California.
Just switching gears again, can you talk more just kind of generally on, what is some of the best or most memorable advice you've ever been given, either from, professionally or just in life in general?
I wouldn't say it's any specific advice, but I've had some really tremendous mentors at T1 as well as my past jobs. And they always encouraged me to push the boundary and figure out how to make it work, right? Sure. As well as frame the narrative for how that concept is or framing that narrative correctly so that the concept is accepted. And really the idea, that you need inspiration, a good source that a client can kind of wrap their mind around and but also there needs to be some performance criteria for why it looks the way that it does. And I think that kind of forms both an objective and subjective narrative that leads to success.
So, okay, you told me, so you've been in San Diego for a little while. I have to ask, what's your favorite thing about it? My one guess is it the weather?
Yeah, it is really, it has to have the best weather in the nation.
Right.
I mean, it's always 75 with a cool sea breeze. So weather is definitely awesome, but there's just a ton to do down here. Mm-hmm. Yeah, between the beach, the mountains, the park, it's a great place to live. Politically, it's very balanced. And the beer scene might top the list.
I was going to ask about that. I was going to say, are you a beer person? And if so, what do you have a favorite microbrewery there?
Oh, big time. I'm a fanatic. So Virgin is probably at the top of my list right now. I'd say also Wild Barrel. God, there's so many. And probably California Wild Ales. There's so many great beers down here.